Good morning. I'm Karen Alvarez. This is a congregation that gathers in faith, not faith in one religion or one God or any one way. We gather in faith of the power of diversity, the power of love, and the hope of a world transformed by our care. We gather in faith in ourselves and those around us, not a faith that requires perfection, rightness in one another. Rather, a faith that in our shared imperfection, we may learn to stumble and fall together. Faith that we will help one another to rise and to try again and again. We are Unitarian Universalists. Our first reading today is Impassioned Clay by Ralph N. Helverson. It is a responsive reading, number 654 in the gray hymnal, or you may also find it in the insert in your bulletin. Deep in ourselves resides the religious impulse. We have religion when we stop deluding ourselves that we are self-sufficient, self-sustaining, or self-derived. We have religion when we hold some hope beyond the present, some self-respect beyond our failures. We have religion when our hearts are capable of leaping up at beauty, when our nerves are edged by some dream in the heart. We have religion when we have abiding gratitude for all that we have received. We have religion when we look upon people with all their failings and still find them good, when we look beyond people to the grandeur in nature and to the purpose in our own heart. We have religion when we have done all that we can, and then in confidence trust ourselves with life that is larger than ourselves.
Our second reading today is also a responsive reading called It Matters What We Believe by Sophia Lyon-Faz. It is number 657 in the gray hymnal. You may also use the insert in your order of service to follow along. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged.
Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way to wider and deeper sympathies.
Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities.
Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with warmth and happiness.
Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies.
Other beliefs are bonds in the world community, where sincere differences unify the passion.
Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction.
Other beliefs are like gateways opening wide vistas for exploration.
Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness.
Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world.
Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life.
Back in April and the first week in May, there was a course held here at Horizon called Articulating Your UU Faith. It was designed to help those who are interested in developing a deeper understanding of Unitarian Universalism, to gain a personal appreciation of Unitarian Universalism, to prepare answers to questions from others about the UU faith in different situations. And at the end of the course, it culminated in an exercise which allowed the participants to explain their personal view of Unitarian Universalism. The course was guided by essentially 5 questions. How is Unitarian Universalism a religion? Are UUs Christian? If you are a UU, you can believe whatever you want, right? Why is Unitarian Universalism important to you personally? And most importantly, why is Horizon important to you? And so I asked a couple of the participants in the class to come and just share a little bit about their experience of the class, some of the personal high points of the class for them. And I thought it would be a good idea to do this in kind of a dialogue to give you the opportunity to kind of just relax and to listen to someone else explain what it means to be UU for a change. Because we've all had that experience where we've kind of explained it, we've had to explain it to others. So I hope that this will be an enlightening service for you. And surprise, surprise, at the very end, you will each have an opportunity to maybe jot down a few of your own thoughts about what it means to be Unitarian Universalist, and then share those if you would like to do that. So I'm going to move over here and get just a little bit more relaxed. So each of you have had a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit, but I would like to give you an opportunity to maybe go a little bit deeper with our congregation and maybe tell us who you are, and then tell us a little bit just about a little bit of your own story, about how you came to be here at this place at this time. And Karen, may I start with you?
So, again, I'm Karen Alvarez, and I grew up in the Christian church, was very actively involved in that, but went off to college and just kind of went away from it and didn't have a connection to any particular church. Fast forward to 2010, my son, who many of you now know is Grayson, he was in the 2nd grade. He came home from school, it was the end of October, and he said, "Mom, Andrew told me that if I dress up for Halloween, that means I worship the devil." And I looked shocked and was like, "Well, where did that come from?" He said, "Well, his church told him that. And he said, we can't do that, or we're going to go to," I won't say the word. So I had been driving past and seeing the Wayside pulpit for many years, and I said, "This is it. I need help. I need help out there, not just the single mom there, finding more answers for my son as well." So on Sunday, October 31st of 2010, we walked into this church. As those laughing know what that looked like, there were over half of the church was dressed in costumes. So I'm like, this is interesting. And then the minister, Reverend Dennis Hamilton, walked up, and he was dressed as the Grim Reaper. No kidding. And I said, this is the place for me. This is a place where I know I can explore and expand. And here we are 8 years later. And the beauty of it is as my son has gone through many of the classes and through 8th grade OWL and just finished coming of age. And we continue the journey. So.
Thank you. We'll just, I'm going to skip over to Menica and let you, and then we'll.
Okay. My name is Menica Padakandla, and I was raised Hindu, but I'd always wanted to go to church when I was young because I saw my friends going to church. And the Hindu temple just didn't offer the community that, like my friends had. You know, they would go to church and talk about their youth groups and things they did, you know, with other kids. Again, fast forward to 2008, actually. I had passed by Horizon many times because I live very close to here, but I never knew that it was a church. In 2008, I stood in line at Horizon to vote in the Democratic presidential primary for 2 hours. And while I was waiting, I read all the pamphlets in the niche. What I read made me realize that Unitarian Universalism was what I had been searching for all my life, but never knew existed. So I became a member of Horizon about 5 years ago, and since then I've been involved in a lot of groups here, the Women's Journey Group, Faith in Texas, Soul Matters, the Horizon Book Group, and I've taken many of the classes that have been offered here. And to echo what Karen said, it's also been a very valuable experience for my children because they've gone through many of the RE classes here as well.
Great, thank you.
So can I talk about how I came to Unitarian
Absolutely.
Universalism? Is it all right? Once again, Lauren Daniel, I'm on staff here as the Director of Lifespan Religious Education. And I am a UU, obviously. I have to admit, the first time I came to Horizon was for my job interview, but I was a member at 2 other Unitarian Universalist churches before that, so I come to it legitimately. Okay. But I just want to tell you a little story about how I came to Unitarian Universalism. I was raised in a Roman Catholic household. I was the youngest of a huge family. We went to church every Sunday and every holy day of obligation. I went to Catholic school, so I went to church every morning. And also, my family is of Polish heritage. My grandparents were from Poland, and so it was almost like Catholicism was an ethnicity and not just a religion. And so I have to admit, though, even with all these connections, and the one thing I didn't tell you is that also my friends were all Catholic, and they were also Polish. And so we all had the same roots, right? But it still did not speak to me. I was going to say, I remember even as early as like age 7, not really, I want to say buying into it. I know that's kind of a crass way of saying it, but I would sit there in Mass and listen to the stories of the miracles of Jesus and the Old Testament and heaven, and it just didn't seem real to me. And then about that age, I had a conversation with my mom. I remember that really well, and I think I asked her, is there really heaven? And she interpreted it as what happens after you die. And so she told me about heaven, well, she told me about purgatory and all that kind of stuff and heaven. And I was like, no, it just didn't seem to make sense to me. So I kind of lived in this limbo for a while. And then I have a lot of older siblings who got married who did not stay with the Roman Catholic religion. And as they began to leave the house and become independent, there was a lot of fighting at my house, especially between my mother and my sisters. And it caused lots and lots of anguish at my house. And I can just remember not believing anything that they were talking about. I mean, it was sort of like they were just arguing over trivial ideas. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, you just like believe all the same thing with just some tiny differences, yet those tiny differences caused huge rifts in my family. And so I think that was how I became a Unitarian Universalist. I think I was a Unitarian Universalist from birth, really, because I could see so really what was going on is that I started thinking about God. Then I think I believed in a traditional God. And I know I'm going into my theology, which I'll talk about later, but I started seeing that each person has a different path. That there's not a one-size-fits-all religion, except for Unitarian Universalism. No, just kidding. But I just thought maybe God is who people need God to be. And for me, at that time, God was the traditional God, but for my mom, God was the God who spoke to the Pope, and for my sisters, God was, well, Jesus. Everything was through Jesus, right? Because they were Protestants. So anyway, long story short, this is not a long story, a short story, I'm sorry. Well, I drifted really through college, and then finally I met Steve Daniel. And Steve told me he church shopped a lot right as we got married. But he finally said, you know, there's this thing called a UU church, a Unitarian Universalist church. And I'm like, oh, yeah, whatever. And then finally we went. And I love this story. It was Father's Day of 1995. And we walked into the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Montgomery. It was lay-led. I hadn't been to church in years. I think I'd maybe visited an Episcopal church once, and that was it. And so we all went outside, and they used a magnifying glass to light the chalice because it was the summer solstice. And I'm like, whoa, this is great. But I think the best part of it was the men's group put on the service. And they talked about what it was like to be a father. They talked about the emotional experience, the spiritual experience, and some of them, I think, did relate it to God, but it was a very spiritual experience. And it was just so eye-opening because it resonated with me. This is the way I experience life. And it reminds me of the Desjardins quote that goes, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And nowadays, now that I work at a church, really, the quote by James Luther Adams kind of sums it all up for me. Church is a place where you get to practice what it means to be human. And so since 1995, I've been a Unitarian Universalist.
Thank you.
I'm done now.
Okay. No, very great. Glad to hear you're practicing being human. That's refreshing. Well, so I found it very interesting that there's even a class offered on articulating your UU faith. And so I'm curious, and I'd like to hear from y'all about how you got interested in the class, and maybe you could share a little bit of what the class was like for you, kind of where you found the most energy in the class.
When I saw this class listed, it struck something with me to say, wow, maybe I can find a place to find my words. I think that's what I had been personally challenged with. Coming here 8 years, I loved sitting here and just thinking and being quiet and still. But when I walked out of here, I had a hard time with words. I know they were all in my head about what I believe or what I thought I believed, but I got really nervous when people would say, what church do you go to? Because then I'd say, Unitarian Universalist Church, and they're like, where's that? And I'm like, oh, it's Horizon, and I'd kind of perk up, and they'd be like, And they'd, I always got that look, and I didn't know how to answer it, so then I would start, and then I would flounder. And so I found myself getting to a place where I didn't want to use the church word, which then that didn't feel comfortable to me, but I didn't want to say I'm going to church, so I would just say, I would just ignore the conversation altogether. So this class gave me an opportunity to sit and think and answer these questions, which were very challenging. And I encourage you all to, and we will start thinking about them. But what the experience allowed me to do is to start putting my words on paper. And I brought my little notebook and feverishly write notes and listen to what others would say. And it was challenging to get it out of my head, but it was a very freeing experience to write it down, to actually make it seem more real, so that I could ultimately, come out of it with some more words. I'm not perfect yet. Working on how to talk about it with others and share that faith. But the class allowed me to kind of get out of my head and in a very comfortable and safe place, because I found that really most of us have that same challenge. I just thought it was me. And then I realized from the class that, no, we all kind of struggle with that look, the tilted head, and what is that? So.
Thank you.
I feel like ever since 2008, I fell in love with Unitarian Universalism because that was something I'd been searching for all my life. I decided to take the class because as much as I value UUism and as important as it is to me, I was having a hard time explaining it to others, especially others who know nothing about it or never heard about it. I get asked fairly often what UUism is since I work as a staff member in the church office. Conversations with people lead to where I work, and that inevitably leads to being asked what Unitarian Universalism is. So I had tried several times to explain the religion to others, but I ended up confusing them and myself. I would try to explain it to try to compare it to their religion, which is usually Christianity, and I would say what UU was not. I'd say we don't believe in God, we don't pray, but again, then I'd say, wait, that's not right, that's not accurate. So this class really helped me to try to find the words to explain UUism to other people. There's some valuable lessons that I learned from the class, and one is keep it positive. And again, I had been approaching it from what Unitarian Universalism was not compared to other religions, and it's better to keep it on a positive note. And also to tell people what I believe, and that I did not have to and cannot speak for the whole UU faith.
Very nice.
So Camilla Norder and I facilitated this class. And the one thing I will say is every time I'm in a small group or I facilitate a class, I think I get out of it just as much as the students do. I mean, so I really enjoyed it. And just a little background, a couple of years ago, we had a strategic plan, and one of them was to map out what a rotation of classes adult UUs should take. I hate to use that word should, but this class made the cut because it is hard to articulate our UU faith. I know sometimes I stumble. I told the class this story about, I guess when I first started, I started using words like non-dogmatic, non-creedal, and the parents' eyes would glaze over, so I stopped doing that. I have a different speech about it. And so, I was the one who suggested that this be a church service and a worship service.
Yeah.
And it's because I just think this is just so critical that we're able to express our faith and think deeply about what it means to us, and then tell everybody why it's important to you. And as Reverend Laura will say, churches aren't location. It's relationship. So if your friend says, "What church do you go to?" and you express yourself in an engaging and meaningful and personal way, they might be like, "Karen, hey, I'll meet you at 10:30 next week," right? So that is the way we're going to be growing the church. I know we have a fabulous website, Wayside Pulpit, Facebook page, all that, but it's really that personal connection, those personal relationships. And so that is the reasons that we wanted to offer this class, and we'll be offering it again in the future.
Great, thank you. So, I love your stories because they're so different, and yet there's kind of this thread that runs through them. And so I'd like to kind of focus in on that a little bit. I know the course was guided by these 5 questions up here, but I was wondering if we could kind of focus in on a couple of them. And as we were getting ready for this, the 2 that we identified that seemed to be the most important to y'all were the first question: why is Unitarian Universalism important to you? And then the second one is, why is Horizon important to you? So, Karen, I'd like to start with you. If you would just say a few words about why Unitarian Universalism is important to you.
Thank you. The overarching thing that stood out to me and why UU is important to me, as Monica said, is making sure I share it, that it is my opinion or what I take from it. And as I studied, I really appreciated that our church and Unitarian Universalism really adjusts, it grows with, in response to the needs of our time. And that meant a lot to me. I think UU is important because it provides a place for the interfaith dialogue. I love that it comes from many different sources: Christianity, Judaism, and many others. I we'll take some words that Reverend Laura shared with us about it attracts seekers of faith from atheists to Zen practitioners and everything in between. And that really spoke to me, that the goal for all of us is to live into our best selves.
Very nice.
You want me to do Horizon too?
Well, I want to ask Minika if you could talk about that first question too.
Well, I have to not obey the rules and combine the two questions into one.
You can do that here.
To me, Unitarian Universalism and Horizon are one and the same, because I found out about UUism through Horizon, and it is the only church that I have ever attended. And both Unitarian Universalism and Horizon are important to me because, as I mentioned before, I had wanted to go to church all my life. I wanted the community of church, but I didn't want to be told that I had to be a Christian and believe what the Christians believed. And I thought you had to be a Christian to go to church. Horizon is especially important to me because I feel that I can be myself here with my culture, my ethnicity, and my beliefs. I feel like I'm accepted exactly the way I am. Here I feel comfortable taking a class like Articulating Your UU Faith. I felt no judgment from others about what I believed.
Nice, very nice. Thank you.
Would you like me to speak,
Of-
or shall we go
of
to the
course.
Horizon part?
Go ahead.
Well, I'll just be very brief. I already told you about my UU journey, and I was thinking about, what just resonates with me about Unitarian Universalism, and I think it's the first principle, just the innate goodness of human beings, that we're not sinful, we're not born into sin. The seventh principle, our connections to each other and to the earth, that we're a part of a rich, full, interdependent web. And this interdependent web does not have to rely on a deity. For me, not having my theology tethered to a deity, a creed, a doctrine is very important for me, based on my childhood experiences, which I explained. And then I just found, most of all, that Unitarian Universalism just unleashed a deep well of spirituality, and it allowed me to experience life in very deep and meaningful ways that I didn't know existed, that I didn't feel being part of Roman Catholicism or a religion with a doctrine and a creed and a deity. And so that's what that means to me.
Very nice. Thank you. Karen, I'm going to throw it back to you. So why is Horizon important to you?
There are two things that really stand out for me, and as an individual, Horizon has been very critical to help me feed my soul, and I felt very welcome from that first Sunday I walked in here with wide eyes, and throughout the journey I've really appreciated how engaging all people have been in wanting to listen and to share. I've appreciated how they've asked for involvement, but when there are times when I was like, can't, there's a trust. It's like, okay, we know when you're able to be involved, you can. And there's times I've been able to help with classes, and that has fed my soul. And there's been times when I've helped with fundraising and things like that, and that has been great. But when I can't, the church understands. And the second part is really helping provide that family, that additional extended family for Grayson and me. I really look at all of you as helping provide guidance for both of us, but for him as well. And it's like having extra parents, so thank you, in our religious journey and his finding his faith as well. So that's why this community is important to me.
Thank you. Yeah. So what I found as I was learning about this class, and regretting that I didn't take it myself back in April, the class culminated in this exercise that y'all did called the Coffee Hour Chat Worksheet, and which sounds really complicated, but But essentially, it's this scenario where you would kind of imagine that you ran into somebody in a coffee shop and they began asking you about your religion or your faith. And so in this exercise, you were asked to kind of think about and address two questions. The first one being, so what is this Unitarian Universalism? And the second one being, okay, you're a UU, what do you believe? And so I'd like each of you to kind of say a few words about that. And then I'm going to give everyone else an opportunity to go inside of your order of service. And there's a card in there that have those two questions on there. And at some point, we're going to give you a few minutes just to reflect on those questions. And if you'd like to write down and jot down a few of your own thoughts. I realize that I'm talking to a group in which we have lifelong Unitarians, Universalists, and we have minute-long Unitarian Universalists. And so a lot of you may have already thought this out and have your ideas and understandings of the UU faith very well formed, and that's great. Love to hear that. We need ideas. So I'll let you, Karen, start us off again, and then we'll give everyone a chance to kind of respond.
So these are big questions. I was excited and a little nervous to answer, but I had my trusty notebook and been feverishly taking notes. We had 2 classes. So after the first class, we were kind of given a homework assignment to answer these questions. It just so happened that there was a Sunday between the 2 classes that I had some time while my son was in COA that I thought, okay, I'm going to take a moment and reflect and think and make notes in my notebook. And so I was very fortunate that the notebook was sitting in my lap, and this was on April 29th, and Reverend Laura got up, and her sermon was Becoming the Church. And she started talking about words and uncertainty, and everything that came out of her mouth ended up going into this notebook because it was all about what we were talking about. And if you haven't seen it, I actually watched it last night on our church YouTube channel. It's very lovely. So it helped me a lot. So I'm sitting there, I'm just writing notes. It's like, oh, the words exist. I don't have to make them up. I don't have to figure out on my own. And as I'm sitting there, I also pulled up the order of service. And if you haven't had a chance to read this, it's in there every Sunday. There's a note to our visitors about what we believe. And I looked down and I read that and I said, oh my gosh, it's already written for me. It's right there. And then all the covenant to affirm and promote, bullet points are listed there. And I thought, I believe all of this. And it draws from many sources, and it's all right there. And it was this aha moment for me when I was trying to make it so difficult for myself to think the words are here if I just listen to them. And so from that, I turned around, and I guess it's not really plagiarism if you take the words that are written in the service, but I wrote my elevator speech or my coffee chat answer, which came to what is UU? And my words are, this is a liberal church united by a common purpose. It embraces the wisdom of ages and cultures. We're creating a community of love, peace, and justice. We see the inherent value of every person, and we believe in the interconnectedness of all things.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you.
Can I go next?
Absolutely.
I wanted to explain what an elevator speech is. That's kind of like UU speak for explaining Unitarian Universalism in a very concise way, as if you were taking an elevator ride. And I'm laughing because we reenacted elevator rides. And I remember Karen Buszczyk going, I got a lot to say. We're going to the 20th floor. But anyway, the people who were in the articulating your UU faith class were very funny and so expressive. Now, my elevator speech is quite short. I wrote, I personally am a UU because it is a religion where we have the freedom to decide our own spiritual paths, and we emphasize that it is not our beliefs which make us good or holy or even saved, but our actions.
Very nice, thank you. I'm getting chills.
Well, I wrote my elevator speech or coffee talk speech by the end of class, but I have not quite gotten it down to being a concise conversation piece, but I've laid out all the ideas, so I need to get on an elevator that goes to like the tallest building in New York City to give this speech, but I think I've got all my ideas in here. I just have to make it more concise. Unitarian Universalists gather together in community, and our religion is based on relationship and connection to other people. We gather around our shared values. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are theists, humanists, agnostics, atheists, pagans, and those who choose not to label themselves, who gather together to learn from each other. We all come together with a different set of beliefs, and we learn from each other in order to follow our own faith journey. I believe that no one religion has all the answers, and I can learn from all the religions. UUs believe in the interdependent web of all existence. I believe that there is a piece of God or a spark of divinity in each of us, and the way that I show that spark is by showing compassion to all living beings and the earth. I believe that my actions, great or small, affect all, and that my life is no more or less valuable than the life of any other person. Salvation means fighting for justice to relieve the suffering in this world and here and now for ourselves and all beings. As a UU, this is how I can do my part to leave this earth a better place than when I came into it.